All guests on ZASLOW Show 2.0 brought to us by the official beer of the program. You know we only drink Johnny Cuba here in the ZASLOW mansion. Go to johnnycuba.us, find the nearest location to you, pick up a six-pack of Johnny Cuba, refreshing German lager in a can. Make sure you always drink responsibly. And of course, don't forget Johnny Cuba's mantra. Stay tranquilo. Our pal is Mike Ryan, Meadowlark Media, Dan LeBatard Show, Miami Hurricane, Golden Cane, Miami Hurricane Insider here with us. I'm practically a college football expert at this point. I mean, before the college football season, before this year, I was not an expert. College football would have been one of my weaker sports, matter of fact. But now, because I'm traveling each week with College Football Tailgate with ESPN Radio, you got Feinbaum, you got me, and then there's everybody else right below us. I'm practically an expert here. Good to have you on the show again. Do a little Miami Hurricane college football. How are you this evening?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. And yeah, I've noticed you've lived a life that many might be envious of. You're hitting a lot of great spots up, huh?
We're at great venues. I mean, this weekend I'm in Austin for Texas, Georgia. Crazy. This past weekend, Red River rivalry, terrible game, but nonetheless, State Fair of Texas, Cotton Bowl, really cool experience. And we got the Hurricanes, in week number 1, which would be the only game that you would expect us to be at for the Canes, Florida, because Canes aren't going to get us at any of the games here. It's not the atmosphere that we're looking for. We want to be like on campus. Doing it right next to El Palacio Stadium Hotel is not exactly what we're shooting for. But I do want to I'm glad we got to do that Canes game. I do want to talk Hurricanes here with you. Number 1, you've been to every game, home and road. What has been the best environment, road games? What's been the best environment so far?
This season?
Yeah.
This season, Cal for sure. I mean, I know Cam Ward got aggregated some for saying that the Swamp wasn't very loud, but the game flow in that game didn't really allow for it. We've been in the Swamp when it's been a packed house that's super into it and a real difficult atmosphere. It wasn't that week 1 because the Canes kind of controlled that game from the jump. Cal was great. Game day at Cal was great. The fans were polite, but they kind of grew into it. And by the time the game rolled around,
they were throwing all kinds of shit at the Hurricane players late in the game.
That was a bad job by ESPN to not show that on camera too, because that was a real bad scene there. And I'm really curious as to how that stayed so quiet, because there were dozens upon dozens of bottles thrown at our players, and security, at least initially, was along for the ride. No, I was sitting in a section with the coaches' wives, and they were getting harassed, and security was, kind of tongue-in-cheek ushering them out, and the same folks would come back down and pretend to look for their seat just to taunt the coaches' wives. And then something happened in the fourth quarter where they stopped coming around. I'm not really sure what. But, it was. I got refused service at Cal Berkeley after the game. They wouldn't allow me into places.
Because you were wearing Canes gear?
Because I was wearing Canes gear. And keep in mind, this is Berkeley. They got signs out in front of saying how welcoming they are. In great detail. They'll allow anybody in there. But apparently the only color of creed they won't allow in there is green and orange. It was crazy.
Where does that comeback in the fourth quarter rank for you? Experiences as a Canes fan. Like, was going into the fourth quarter, was the entire season going up in flames in your mind?
It wasn't going up in flames, because by the time the fourth quarter started, I had already rationalized, like, okay, we were going to lose a dumb one along the way. This is tough. First game day here, game day. I was already doing all the rationalization.
You were mentally preparing for the loss.
Yeah, I would. Well, at halftime, I had already come to the conclusion that we had lost that game. And it wasn't until midway through the fourth that the hope started inside me, like, well, if we can get a stop here and put together another drive. And then by the time that they ruled, I thought the face mask call, which was right, was a death blow. But then by the time that they ruled that it wasn't targeting, which was a right call, I maintain that. Everyone...
I don't agree. Let
me tell you something. He hit him too hard. If he didn't hit him that hard, it's not a call, because he hit him on his shoulder. to me, it was clear because I was right behind the play. I can understand how someone slowing it down on an instant replay like Brock Osweiler, you can barely make out where the contact's happening. Ultimately, Bassane just hit him too hard.
Let me ask you something, mate, because maybe I don't know the rule. Let me ask you something. Even if he didn't hit him in the helmet, which I'm not entirely sure about that, if you launch yourself head first like a torpedo, does it matter where you hit him on the body?
Well, if you launch yourself head first, he didn't launch himself head first. That was shoulder to shoulder. Oh, okay, well, that's also. I'll tell you another thing that complicates it, Zaz, is that it was a quarterback running, so people can't deprogram themselves from understanding that this is not a defenseless player here. If that's Ott running that play, maybe the discourse isn't what it is right now. But people have to remember that Mendoza was essentially a running back on that play. So, okay, agree to disagree. Miami didn't win that game because that call. It certainly helped. Miami still had 3 timeouts, and while it certainly would have made winning that game a hell of a lot more difficult, it wasn't outside the realm of possibility. And anytime you blow a 25-point lead, you come off pretty soft to me.
Yeah,
you're holding up like a targeting call that didn't go your way. How many? We had Amari Carter down here for quite a long time, Zaz. I'm well familiar with what a targeting is, and I'm well familiar with a targeting costing you a game. To me, that wasn't that. You want to complain? Fine. These things happen in a game. I thought Jaden Ott stepped out of bounds on that 66-yard touchdown, and I have evidence to prove it from a still image, since we want to do that. So I would say that ultimately Miami did what is proving to be very difficult, which is for a Power 4 conference team to travel from an Eastern time zone to a Western time zone. We see Big Ten teams struggle with it. They're 3-10. Ohio State, that's not the reason why they lost, but it certainly couldn't help because that game was super tight. It is hard this season in college football to win. To survive and advance, winning is hard. And more teams are going to get caught looking ahead than ever because there are so many marquee games on a schedule. And I think this year, having a 0 under that L column is actually really important. It is hugely important, especially for conferences that aren't the SEC and Big Ten. They need to run the table to deem themselves worthy of people's approval. But Alabama, for whatever reason, getting one over the line doesn't really get held up against them. Tennessee, I'm guilty of gassing them up, certainly. Tennessee goes to overtime against a team that Miami thoroughly smashed. So I think there's still a real SEC bias that people, once again, there's this word again, deprogram. There was an SEC bias that was put in everybody's brain back in the good old days where the SEC was allowed to cheat with impunity. And now that the talent has been distributed, people still can't break themselves away from that SEC bias. And it's going to hurt the 2 ACC teams, Miami and Clemson, that are chasing playoff spots.
Well, so that's what I want. That's what I want to ask. Is there a path for 2 ACC teams?
Because
I think
but again, preconceived notions about the ACC. There's a scenario where Miami can finish undefeated and not make the ACC championship.
Is that right?
There is, yes. Because
what is that? What does that look like?
Clemson, SMU, undefeated inside their conference, and then it goes to a tiebreaker. And
which would be what?
The tiebreaker scenario, I don't know exactly what it is, but the tiebreaker scenario that I saw had Miami on the outside looking in as an undefeated team, and SMU and Clemson in the ACC championship. So it's because these teams don't play each other during the regular season.
Well, let me ask you though, if that's let's say that happens right there, and let's say Clemson beats SMU, okay, which is what you need, because if SMU wins, then the Canes are definitely fucked. But if Clemson were to win, and the Canes didn't get the opportunity, they're undefeated, that's probably a pathway for the Canes as an at-large, right?
And undefeated Miami is making the playoff no matter what.
Okay.
They're making the playoff no matter what. And undefeated Miami is probably going to get a playoff home game. I would say that.
Probably. Oh yeah, for sure. An undefeated Miami, they're number 6 right now. They would definitely get a home game, even if they don't win the ACC.
I would say that if Clemson ended up running the table from where they're at, a 1-loss Clemson team. Well, if they run the table, they get the bye anyways. But let's say like a 2-loss Clemson team probably gets into the playoff.
Gets dicey.
It's certainly more difficult for them, but you can't. There is going to be a 3-loss SEC team or Big Ten team that gets
You think
into
so?
this fight.
You think so? Because if there's a 3-loss Big Ten team, that especially, I believe, then opens the door for a second ACC team.
I would certainly hope so, but this bias is pretty strong. And one thing that I've noticed is people aren't watching the games as like we're having coaches and press vote on this stuff. I see people that are AP voters on the golf course posting, and they had the nerve to say that the computer didn't save properly when they voted Miami number 16. It's a flawed system, but ultimately,
okay. Let's talk about that, because I addressed this on my show on Monday, where I know some Canes fans were annoyed that the polls come out on Sunday and the Canes didn't jump into the top 5. And my point was, it doesn't matter. It literally doesn't matter. If the Canes win the ACC, at worst, they're going to be the 3 seed. They could be ranked 10, 12, 15. It doesn't fucking matter. If the Canes win the ACC, they're going to be likely the number 3 seed and have a first-round bye.
You're right. You're ultimately right. These things will sort themselves out, but every Miami Hurricanes fan still has this persecution complex, and week to week, it's funny. Everybody is somebody until Miami beats them, and then they become a nobody.
That's a good point.
Cal traveled to the Eastern time zone, should have won a game against an undefeated Pitt team. If Cal wins that game, it doesn't help Miami because Miami beat them. Who cares? Florida stinks, right? Florida stinks because Miami throttled them. Florida goes to overtime, should have went for 2, had a shot to win that game.
Unbelievable, right? If you're Billy Napier, what's the explanation for not going for 2 there?
You're a 14.5-point dog. This is not a time to play it safe, Billy. Like, your job is on the line. That was your quarterback's hurt. Like, you go and try to steal one.
Yep.
It was so dumb. Like, just dumb. And it was super dumb of Cal to play for a field goal when their field goal kicker stinks. They take out their starting quarterback on a 3rd and 9 to rush for 2 yards with a backup to set up a 30-something yard field goal when I think they're like 1 for 5 on the season from 30 yards. Just some bad coaching out there. But yeah,
Mike, which of these games left for Miami could be the game you think that they get tripped up?
This is a tough one. This is a real.
Am I remembering incorrectly? I feel like Miami usually plays well at Louisville. Am I remembering that right?
You can't throw the data out, especially in this whole new world. These rosters turn over year over year. I'd say I'd be more concerned with what happened last year, which was Lance Guidry. I respect Lance Guidry. I think he's a good defensive coordinator. Brom was absolutely in his bag and dominated Guidry in ways that we hadn't seen all year up until that point. So I would say let's look at recent history here. Louisville won a game that Miami probably should have won. Tyler Van Dyke was going through his thing at the time, and he didn't play that poorly in. So I'd be a little bit more worried about that. I think they're a little aided by this noon start and the fact that they have a week off. But we'll see the injury to Haynes King and Georgia Tech. That could be a sneaky spot too. But it's what we said headed into week 1. When I called this, when I was on your podcast, Zaz, and I called Miami's game against Florida, arguably the most important in program history, because if they won that game, the rest of the season and that schedule opens up so nicely for them. I think the expectation from any Canes fan entering this year is, all right, can we make it through the schedule with 1 loss, get to Charlotte again, finally, for just a second time in our ACC history? That should be good enough. So while you have one of the Heisman favorites at quarterback and you're 6-0 for the first time since 2017, you don't necessarily want to hear the rationale that you had at the beginning of the season where you're okay with a loss. But if you're looking for one, this week's a tricky spot.
Can you make a case for Cam Ward as the Heisman frontrunner?
Yeah, I think he's a Heisman front runner, and I know that's the odds don't necessarily back that up, but come on.
I think he is too.
A group of 5 running back, even though he's amazing, Genty, like no one's staying up, no one's actually watching him.
Right.
Cam Ward is a pop culture phenomenon with everybody doing his celebration, which is, I know.
Okay, hold on. What does the celebration mean?
So the celebration, Cam Ward actually gave like Western Kentucky their respect in this because he had an offensive coordinator that came from Western Kentucky. It's called the Zombie Land. It doesn't really matter what it means. The fact is it's super popular now because Cam Ward does it. And it became known as a Cam Ward celebration. And over the weekend, there was a lot of internet discourse over, Western Kentucky trying to claim it. And I would say that someone probably did the moonwalk before Michael Jackson did. Miami makes things cool. People had, items that they would put on after forcing a turnover. It was only until Miami did the turnover chain that it became a national sensation. So that still means something. That this is still a taste-making program. And yeah, maybe people did it before Cam Ward, but it's Cam Ward Selly. It's hard.
Mike, give a grade to Mario Cristobal this season so far.
I would say A+ so far, quite honestly. Recruiting at a high level. Our main concern with Mario Cristobal is game day. I can think to one mistake that he's made on the season, which was punting at Florida when they were around midfield. Florida has like a 2-play drive, and then Miami quickly answers, and the game's out of hand after that. Even against Virginia Tech, we had our questions about game management. People said that he made the right calls. And at Cal, I'm sure if you were still awake at the time, you, like many Canes fans, were screaming, call a timeout. But I know people that run in NFL circles, that talk to people that excel in game management, and it was close, but Mario pushed all the right buttons. Even going for 2 in that game, which in the moment didn't make sense, it helped Miami win that game. So he's actually alleviated a lot of these game day concerns that we have from him. I would say defensively, Miami has something very clear and obvious that they have to fix, which is these last 2 teams on their schedule that don't have huge game breakers, have challenged Miami's defensive backs to make tackles in space. And over the last 2 games, Miami has failed to answer that challenge. So hopefully during the bye, those things get addressed. But Mario Cristobal, from a talent acquisition perspective and hitting the recruiting trail, is every bit the person that he was advertised to be and more. And so far, so good on the game management side. In terms of being a bad game day coach, it's going to take a lot of winning to undo that reputation. But he hasn't had a misstep so far this year. That's not to say that he won't, but you're asking me to grade him up until this point. This is an A.
Lastly here, Mike, I don't want to look past Louisville, but I'm not going to talk to you again before next week. So against FSU, what margin of victory against FSU will please you?
Please me. I don't even know what the spread would be in that game. I think that's gonna look. You're not a noob to college football. I think we can all expect that to be one of FSU's best efforts all season long. They had a defensive line that Nick Saban on College Game Day called the best in the nation before that Georgia Tech game.
So you don't necessarily think they'll blow them out?
I think these are rivalry games. A lot of people thought Tennessee was going to blow out Florida, and that is
the Gators were begging Tennessee to win that game.
Begging them. But that was a 14.5 point spread in the screwy little rivalry that they have there. Rivalry games are tough. So I would say that we will probably get Florida State's best effort in that game. So what will please me is decisively winning. Like maybe I can see that being a situation where Miami plays with its food a little bit and frustrates folks, maybe trails deeper into the game, and then ultimately the talent wins out. But I'm very big on this season is a grind, maybe for some conferences more than others, but winning matters. Being perfect, that should matter in this new landscape of college football. And if Miami continues that trend, again, not looking past Louisville, which will certainly be a challenge, I'd be happy with a dub. I'm not going to say blow them out by 30. I would love that. I've been in that stadium when Miami has, but ultimately the bottom line is getting back to Charlotte. So however we go about doing that.
Canes are a 4-point favorite this weekend at Louisville. Mike, excellent job. Safe trip there to Louisville this weekend. Plug everything you got going on. Let everybody know how they can hear you talk more Hurricanes.
On the Dan LeBatard Show with Stu Gott's feed, we do our thing daily, but every other Friday, there's a new installment of the oral history of the Dan LeBatard Show. It's a project that I took on to celebrate our 20 years in this industry. Episode 3 drops on Friday. It's shaping up to be a real good one. I'm proud of the first 2 episodes. They've been well received. And if you specifically want to hear my Canes content, I'm partnered up with the guys over at CanesInsight. Really proud of this partnership and this company that we've built. For my money, best day in and day out Miami Hurricanes coverage that you can find out there. I'm live with D-Money every Wednesday. We do a good job, if I do say so myself. So make sure to check out CanesInsight. And many people watching right now might already be posting on that message board. About 8 million posts we're approaching. We should hit that in a couple of weeks here.
That is good stuff. CanesInsight. Excellent job. Keep up the great work, Mike. Good luck the rest of the season.
Hey, Zaz, you keep up the great work too, man. I'm really proud of you. Like you're kicking ass. You're doing great things for ESPN. This college football fall tour that you're on has got to be like a once in a lifetime type of thrill for you. That's like dream stuff, right? When you were a kid wanting to get in this industry, if someone told you, dude, in your career, you're going to take so many twists and turns, but Red River rivalry, you're going to be there. You're going to be at the biggest games. You're going to be in Austin for Texas versus Georgia. I'm really proud of you, dude.
Thanks. Yeah, it's really great. It's a lot of fun. I'm enjoying it. Very lucky and grateful. Appreciate it, man. Thank you for hanging out.
You're killing it. Hey, what do you think about John Moxley and AEW and the booking in that?
I'll tell you, I he wins the title, and then again with the attempted murder with the bag over Bryan Danielson's head. I don't like it. I'm not as dialed into AEW. I know what's happening, but I don't watch every show anymore with AEW. I'm completely consumed with WWE. It's the fucking best. But I don't like it. Like, just think about last week with Roman Reigns, Bad Blood. Roman Reigns, Jimmy Uso. They hug. He saves them. I did it for you, Us. You called the play, and then they hug. And it's like, yeah, like wrestling makes you feel good. That's when wrestling is at its best. Is when it draws the emotion and it makes you feel good. And that pay-per-view for AEW ended the other night with Bryan Danielson with a plastic bag over his head. Like, I don't know.
It took all the air out of the arena, but I would say that was kind of the plan. And no doubt that's exactly how Bryan Danielson wanted it to go. He called his shot. That's what he wanted people to feel. And
you know what? I could do with a little bit of less of what you just said too. Where why do we have to know everything? Why do we can we at least pretend? Can we have a facade that it's real? Okay. Why do we have to know everything behind? Oh, this Bryan Danielson wanted to lose to Moxley and he wanted it to be that way. Why do I have to know that? It takes away from the event. It does.
Okay. Well, everyone's entitled to their opinion. I certainly get the appeal of the Bloodline saga, but I think for 4 years it's largely been super predictable, and the payoffs haven't been that great. There have been a couple mile markers along the way. I'll be the first to tell you, WrestleMania was a spectacle, and how they actually pulled a win out of bad booking was nothing short of miraculous. But look, okay, we're going through the motions here. Jimmy's inevitably going to come back. Jay's going to come back. They're going to set up War Games. Sammy will be the fourth man.
Yes.
We're all going to try to. But the thing is, these things have been telegraphed from 3 years ago. This storyline is so played out, in my opinion. And the matches aren't actually delivering in that sense. No, there have been so many bad matches. Like, think about how drawn out the Jey Uso Roman Reigns stuff was. One of the worst matches of all time in the SummerSlam in Detroit. It was just one of the worst matches ever. Jimmy and Jay at WrestleMania. Terrible match. In the ring, there are very few payoffs for this. And we are very rarely surprised when we turn on the TV to SmackDown or Raw. What's going to happen next in the Bloodline saga? Spoiler alert, you probably saw it coming. So I think while it's been well told, it's also been super predictable. And the action in the ring hasn't exactly reflected the ambition from a long-term storytelling perspective. So I would say that a lot of it is exhausting to me. And you can do what I've done over the last 2.5 years, which is I'll check in the premium live event. What's the matchup there? All right. Roman goes over because of outside interference. And I'll check back with the big four. Okay, what's going to happen at Survivor Series? All right, Bloodline goes over and Sammy gets accepted. And those emotional moments, because of the strength of storytelling, that's good. I'm sorry, that's it. But the payoffs are just. I think it's overrated, Zaz. I think it's overrated.
Wow. So, but it sounds like then you disagree with what I said about AEW. You were okay. Like it for me, the violence is a little bit much sometimes. You know, like Swerve has got a syringe sticking out of his lip. Come on.
I hear you. I think that AEW is an alternative, and they're doing the
hearing
thing.
that. So like I get it that it's an alternative. I understand. It's a different program. It's obviously an alternative.
Right. So you've made the choice to not follow it week to week, and I don't exactly follow it week to week either. Like I'll keep tabs if I've got nothing going on. I'll watch it there, but. Like I told you the last time I was on, I think that a lot of the criticisms of AEW were justified. They had a rough spring. It was real bad. The numbers reflected that. They had a lot of bad luck with injuries, a lot of guys that were out. They never really recovered. You have to keep in mind their biggest star has essentially been out for 2 full years in Kenny Omega. I think that there's a lot of reasons as to why it struggled, but I do think that narrative is from a bygone era in that it's been quite strong for a couple of months. And I think head to head, it's actually been the better product in terms of delivering in the ring and giving you good storylines. I don't understand the divisiveness. Really, I don't. I enjoy both. I watch both.
I do too, for the most part. Yeah, there's a lot of tribalism out there. It's weird, you know.
I don't understand that. There are social media accounts that exist that just tout WWE and knock down AEW. When we were growing up, we consumed it all. ECW, WCW, WWE, and we loved it all. Yeah, we had our favorites. We were probably, once the Attitude Era got going, we were pro WWE guys, but that didn't mean that we were crapping all over the WCW product. Where we're at right now, where you have to be an AEW guy or a WWE guy, I think most people try to watch both and are appreciative and understand that having an alternative out there certainly got WWE's ass in gear because they were really struggling for a while there. AEW was clearly the superior product. It made WWE better. Competition makes everybody better. So
did you enjoy the McMahon documentary?
I did. I was surprised that I was in it. I was in it a couple of times. My voice was. I didn't know that. Didn't.
When?
In like the first 5 minutes of episode 1, and then the closing voice in episode 5.
What were you saying? You know, maybe I'll remember. What were you saying?
I was just doing exposition stuff, I guess, that they pulled. I had no idea that they were going to use it from the show, but it was clips from the show and me talking about Vince and
that's cool.
His scandal. Yeah, it was cool. It was a nice surprise for me as I was watching because I didn't catch it at first. I'm like, wait a second, was that me?
That's cool.
The McMahon stuff was it was a good documentary. A lot of the stuff that I knew, but they provided a new perspective on. Like I've seen so many.
Yeah, you got Vince's perspective. We've never heard from Vince.
I thought the Wendy Richter stuff, like I had heard about that, but I'd never seen the footage.
Me too.
In terms of like framing the Bret stuff. Like the Bret Hart Montreal Screwjob stuff has been covered ad nauseum by.
Of course, but you know what? I could hear anyone talk about that forever. Anytime somebody wants to talk about Montreal Screwjob, I'm here for hearing about it.
I would say that this was probably right up there with the A&E special on Bret Hart that aired in terms of revelatory stuff. Like mine is damn near 30 years after the fact, and we're learning new things about it and getting new footage. I thought that stuff was fascinating. It could have been twice the amount of episodes, honestly. I couldn't get enough of it. I think salute to Ringer Films and everybody that worked on that because I thought it was quite good. And you could tell that they kind of had to change the story in the middle of it. And I thought that they did a good job. They probably, I know that there's a lot of pro WWE people, pro Vince people, because that has to exist in the world, that are upset at the representation. But I thought they could have been even harder on Vince. I really do.
Of course. I think people tuned into it thinking the whole thing was going to be about the sex scandals, and very little of it was.
Pritchard going up there and playing dumb about Pat Patterson. Like everybody knew about Pat Patterson. That's like the worst kept secret in the history of the industry.
I've been told firsthand from people. I'm not going to name names, but I've been told firsthand from people about Pat Patterson.
Yeah, come on, man. Like Pritchard embarrassed himself there.
Loves Vince.
Well, it was good catching up with you, Zaz. Hopefully you have me on again and we can nerd out about wrestling. And
yes.
And maybe the Canes will still be undefeated. It's hard to go undefeated, man. It's hard to win. Winning is hard. And you're going to find that out this weekend, which is one of the better slates in college football history. Week in, week out, this thing is a grind. All the travel, all the look-ahead games. You have so many more look-ahead games on your schedule because you have so many more marquee opponents. Unprecedented travel for a bunch of teenagers. And the talent has been distributed. The looks that I got, Zaz, when I said NIL would actually mean for more parity. When it first came on the scene, everybody just assumed that all these schools that were already paying players, all these schools that were already paying players,
no, you're right,
were going to get stronger when kids want to play, dude. Like the talent has been spread out a little bit more evenly. Nick Saban's a smart man. He didn't leave because he thought it was time. It probably would have been time 10 years from now if the sport never changed. Like he got out because he knew his monopoly over the sport was about to end. This is great. College football is having its best year ever. This is amazing. And you're riding sidecar on it. You're at these big events. I'm so proud of you, dude.
Thank you, dude. I appreciate it, man. Hopefully we'll run into each other again sometime soon.
Yes, sir. Take care.